Have you ever looked in the mirror and thought, "Who have I become?" Not in a proud, accomplished kind of way, but with that quiet feeling deep down that you've lost something. There was a time when you were clearer, stronger, more connected to who you really were. But over time, life's noise, pressure, expectations, you slowly drifted away from your center. And the hardest part is, you didn't even notice it happening. But what if I told you it only takes 7 days to feel like a different person? Not by becoming someone else, but by peeling off the layers you've picked up. 7 days, 168 hours. That's enough, Timino, to reinvent yourself, but to remember who you were before the world told you who you should be. And the beautiful part is, this kind of transformation doesn't start with a dramatic action or a flashy life reset plan. It begins in the quietest place, your breath at dawn, the moment your eyes open, and the way you choose to meet yourself before the world meets you. In that stillness, you'll find your way back not to the version of you that others expected, but the version that's whole, clear, and quietly powerful. And if you're truly ready, these next 7 days won't just be a challenge, they'll be a return. A stepping out of old habits and into a new standard, not loud, but deeply steady. So where does that journey begin? It starts right here with the morning, where breath, stillness, and discipline come together. 1. Discipline isn't the goal, it's the bridge. Most people don't realize this, but discipline is never the destination. It's just the tool, the boat, the way back home. So many begin their self-growth journey with intense motivation. They set early alarms, schedule meditation, plan workouts, clean up their diet, and for a few days, they're on fire. Day 1, strong. Day 2, focused. But by day 5 or 6, fatigue creeps in, a little discouragement, and then the voice in their head whispers, "You've already failed." But that disappointment doesn't come from missing one workout or skipping a sit. It comes from clinging to discipline like a badge of worth, as if we must earn peace through perfection. But real awakening, real peace, doesn't come from rigid performance. It comes from the way we return to ourselves gently, in small breaths, in quiet steps. There's a beautiful teaching in the Anguttara Nikaya. The Buddha said, just as a boat carries a person across the river once they reach the other shore, the wise one does not carry the boat on their back. It's so simple, and yet profound. Discipline is the boat. We need it while crossing. But once we've reached the shore of awareness, we must let it go. In this modern world, it's easy to turn discipline into an identity. Waking up at 5 a.m., meditating exactly 30 minutes, eating the perfect meal plan. But somewhere along the way, we lose the lightness. We lose the aliveness of it. At that point, discipline stops being the brigand, becomes a cage. There's nothing wrong with good habits, but if we forget why we began, we're not practicing self-awareness. We're just building a fancier ego wrapped in the costume of self-improvement. A grounded practitioner isn't led by form, but by intention. Because even the right things can harden the heart if done without awareness. Real discipline is simply the art of returning. No fanfare, no pressure, just a soft reminder. Be here, just this breath. And when that becomes natural, not something you do, but something you are, then discipline fades away. Because presence has taken its place. And it all begins from something as simple as this. The quiet moment right after your eyes open in the morning. The world is still asleep. And that is the perfect time to come home. 2. The morning is a sacred ritual. There's a moment in the day that most people overlook. It's that very first breath after waking up, when everything is still quiet, before the phone buzzes, before anyone calls your name, before the noise of the world barges in. That moment is like a doorway. If you step through it with mindfulness, your whole day flows from a place of clarity. But if you skip it, just a quick glance at your phone, a scroll through the news, a racing thought, then the entire day might pass without you ever feeling truly present. For most people, the morning is just the start of another workday. But for someone who knows how to turn inward, the morning is a sacred ritual, a time to renew the soul. In Buddhism, there's a beautiful idea called early mindfulness, keeping your awareness steady right from the start. The ancients believed that if your morning begins with presence, then no matter how busy your day becomes, your heart will stay rooted and unshaken. Imagine someone who wakes up and immediately dives into emails, to-do lists, breaking news. That mind is like a river hit by a storm. There's no space left for stillness, no room for simply being. But someone who protects that first hour of the day just to breathe, to listen, to walk slowly, even if the world outside spins fast, they carry a quiet space within. It's like lighting a candle before the wind begins to blow. Your morning doesn't need to be long, but it must be sacred. You don't need to do a lot, but whatever you do, let it be done wholeheartedly. Sit still, on the edge of your bed, bow gently to a cup of tea, or simply breathe in, breathe out, and know you're alive. There's a line in an ancient Buddhist text. The wise one, upon waking, keeps body, speech, and mind in mindfulness. That day shall not be wasted. No need to talk much, no need to rush, no need to let the outside world steal your first sacred moment. This isn't a rule, it's an act of respect for yourself. Because truly, there's no ritual more sacred than opening your eyes with a deep breath and a quiet thank you for one more day to live better than the last. If you can protect your morning, you've protected the root of your entire day. And when the mind is nourished from dawn, the body naturally follows. 3. Real change comes from within. In today's world, we hear a lot about change. Change your appearance, change your style, change your environment, change your relationships. But rarely do people talk about the kind of change that happens quietly from within. The kind that's slow, but deep, silent, but unshakable. So often, people try to appear transformed. A new photo, a bold caption, a fresh image, like saying to the world, "I'm not who I used to be." But a few weeks later, when the buzz fades, they find themselves back in old habits, still carrying old wounds, feeling an emptiness they can't explain. Because real change doesn't come from proving anything to the world. It begins in solitude, in the silent space where no one's watching, no one's judging, and you finally ask yourself, what am I really living for? Am I being honest with myself? I once met a middle-aged Buddhist practitioner, well-respected, calm, successful on the outside. But in a silent retreat, he shared something that moved the whole room. I realized I've never truly changed. I've only gotten better at hiding. And that's a truth many can relate to, because the world celebrates outcomes. But the Dharma sees causes and conditions. Out there, image matters, but the path of awakening reminds us. The mind is the forerunner of all things. The mind is the master. The mind creates all. Dhammapada verse 1. If your mind hasn't changed, then no image will last. If your roots are not nourished, even a blooming tree won't stand long. True transformation is when one quiet morning you choose not to react. When someone says something harsh, and all you do is softly exhale. No anger, no blame. When you see an old face, recall a painful memory and your heart no longer trembles. You don't need to say, "I've changed." True change doesn't need an announcement. It shows up in your gaze, in your steps, in the quiet peace others feel when you enter a room, even when you say nothing. And from that stillness, once the mind is at peace, the body naturally follows. 4. Don't change to become someone else. Let go of the conditioned self. There's a question many people ask when they begin a journey of self-transformation. What version of myself will I become? But the deeper you go, that question starts to shift. It's no longer, who am I becoming? But rather, how much of what I'm not can I let go of? Because the truth is, you don't need to become someone else. You don't need to add more, or decorate yourself, or collect images of success out there in the world. You simply need to shed one layer at a time, everything that no longer aligns with the purity that's always been inside you. In Buddhist teachings, this is known as non-self. It's not about denying who you are. It's about letting go of the conditioned ego, the self shaped by years of fear, pressure, and trying to please. The version of you that learned to strive just to make others happy. The version of you that believed you were only worthy if you succeeded. The one that feared rejection, feared not being loved, feared being forgotten. All those selves aren't your true nature. They're just layers, habits, reactions, the echoes of childhood, the voices of others, the pressure of the world. But underneath all of that, there's something still and aware, watching from within. I once spoke with a Buddhist woman who shared her own story. She had spent nearly 10 years chasing the image of a perfect woman, well-mannered, successful, always smiling, never allowed to be weak. Until one day, in the middle of a silent retreat, she sat in meditation and tears began to fall. Not from pain, but from relief. Because for the first time, she touched a space inside herself where she didn't have to try anymore. She said, "I don't want to become anyone anymore. I just want to be real and still feel light." That's a turning point in practice. When you stop treating yourself like a project that needs to be fixed, and instead, like a river that simply needs its debris cleared so it can return to clarity. The Buddha never told us to become anything. He simply pointed the way to see clearly and release. And when all the layers of illusion, anxiety, shame, ego, anger begin to fall away, your natural clarity shines through, like the moon appearing behind the clouds. True transformation is a return. And sometimes that return doesn't require adding anything new, just letting go of what was never really you to begin with. And from there, every step you take, every movement you make, is no longer about proving anything, but about living in harmony with your body, your mind, and your heart. 5. Presence is the root of all transformation. Here's something strange about the world today. People are always busy, always doing multiple things at once. And yet, they still feel empty. It's not because they lack time, it's because they're not present in what they're doing. You might be eating, but your mind is stuck in an unread email. You might be talking, but your eyes keep checking your phone. You might even be meditating, but your mind is already in tomorrow's meeting. We live in a world full of options, but we've lost touch with the most basic thing, presence. In Buddhism, there's a beautiful image. A person pouring tea, just pouring tea, hearing the sound as it flows, smelling the aroma, feeling the warmth of the cup, looking gently into it. That's it. But when your body and your mind are both present, even a simple act becomes meditation. Presence or mindfulness isn't some mystical concept. It's the ability to do one thing fully, with your whole awareness, no distraction, No part of yourself left behind. A woman once told me she felt exhausted every day, even though she wasn't doing anything physically hard. After a Dharma talk, she realized, for years, she'd been living with her head in the future and feet in the present. She said, "I've never really been present, not even for the little things, like a meal or a loved one's smile." And it's true. If you're not really here, nothing you change will ever go deep. Because only when you're truly present can you begin to see what you're doing, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And only when you see clearly can you begin to transform. The Buddha taught, when walking, know you are walking. When standing, know you are standing. When sitting, know you are sitting. Not because he wanted us to follow rituals blindly, but because he understood something simple and profound. Awakening can only happen here and now. You don't need to meditate for 3 hours a day to practice. Just wash the dishes and be with the dishes. Just take a deep breath and feel it touch your chest. That alone is already transformation. Because presence is the root. Without it, every promise of change is just passing wind. But when you are truly present, even one breath can soften your anger. Even one gaze can heal misunderstanding. And when your mind is here, your actions start to carry depth. Your movements stop being reactions and start becoming expressions of conscious life. 6. A strong body builds a steady mind. Here's something not everyone thinks about when talking about inner transformation. If you want a steady mind, you also need a steady body. A lot of people begin their spiritual journey by reading, meditating, or listening to Dharma talks. But after a while, they lose clarity. The spark fades. And often, deep down, it's because their body hasn't caught up with their mind. The body isn't an obstacle. It's not something to overcome. In Buddhist teachings, body, speech, and mind are the 3 core actions of human life. And body comes first. The body is the foundation. It's the vehicle, the boat that carries your awareness across the river of suffering. When the body is weak, the mind gets easily disturbed. One small ache, a tired morning, and even your biggest intentions can be put on hold. But when the body is trained not for looks, but for strength, flexibility, and grounded presence, the mind, too, can root itself deeper in the present. I remember a man who came to a temple retreat. He was calm, knew the teachings well, but always seemed tired. He'd run out of breath just climbing the stairs. His back hurt during meditation. He'd skip walking meditation because his legs were too weak. Later, he made a quiet commitment to build his strength again. Simple morning walks, breathing steadily during movement. And one day, he said something that stuck with me. When my body got stronger, my mind felt lighter. Training your body doesn't mean turning into an athlete. Sometimes, it's just walking slowly around the house, feeling your feet touch the floor. Stretching your limbs in the morning not to pose, but to wake up your sleeping energy. Letting sweat roll down your back, reminding you, I'm alive, and I'm strong enough to care for myself. The Buddha once said, there is no true wisdom without caring for the body, because your body is your temporary home. If that house crumbles, your mind has no place to rest. And perhaps the most important part of physical practice isn't intensity, it's presence. When each movement and each breath quietly whispers, I am here, I am alive, and I am coming home, then movement becomes meditation. And when body and mind start moving as one transformation begins, not out of pressure, but from deep agreement between body and soul. 7. Breath, the doorway back to yourself. There's something simple yet powerful. Your breath has been with you since the moment you were born, and it'll be with you until your final day. But strangely, most of the time we don't even notice it. We breathe like it's automatic, and because it's always there, we forget. Breath is the quiet bridge between your body and your mind, between the present moment and your true self. In Buddhism, breath isn't just biology. It's a practice, a path. It's how we return from the chaos of overthinking, anxiety, and rush. At its deepest, breath is a place to come home to. There was a woman, over 50, who once shared during meditation class, "I've traveled to so many places searching for peace, vacations, retreats, even monasteries. But it wasn't until I stopped, closed my eyes, and breathed slowly that I realized peace had been in my chest all along. I just hadn't listened." And it's true. Every deep transformation begins with one present breath. No rush, no force, just breathing in and knowing you're breathing in, breathing out and knowing you're breathing out. After enlightenment, the Buddha didn't begin by teaching deep philosophy. He started with anapanasati mindful breathing, because he knew when someone can rest in their breath, they already hold the key to come home to now. The breath doesn't care if you're new or experienced. It doesn't ask you to change your life. It just invites you to pause. Right now, if your mind is racing, anxious, jumping from past to future, come back to the breath. It's like a lost child in the forest suddenly hearing their mother's voice. Breath is that voice. When you breathe with awareness, life becomes lighter. The questions in your head soften, and slowly, your body relaxes. Your mind stops resisting. You begin to feel life, not just move through it. You don't need a bookshelf of wisdom to start walking the path. You just need to know how to breathe and know that you're breathing. It sounds small, but it can change everything. Breath is the silent companion, the most faithful one you have. And the moment you begin to listen to it is the moment you begin to listen to yourself. From that stillness, a new habit begins to form. Not to impress anyone, but to live more truthfully with yourself each and every day. 8. Silence. Not to escape, but to return. Someone once asked, "Can silence really heal?" And the answer is, it depends on what kind of silence you're holding. Because there's a kind of silence that comes from fear when you're too scared to speak your truth. There's a silence born from hurt when words no longer build bridges, but feel like knives. But there's also another kind of silence, deeper, quieter, where the mind no longer gets swept away by endless thoughts. That's the silence of mindfulness. In Buddhist meditation, you're not taught to force yourself into silence. You're guided to return to that still observer within. No chasing emotions, no suppressing thoughts, just staying with yourself in a space where nothing needs explaining. I remember a man who went through a painful divorce. He didn't argue, didn't try to defend himself. Each morning, he simply walked slowly through his backyard garden. No music, no phone, just steps, just breath. After 3 months, he said something quietly profound. "I still don't have the answers, but I no longer feel the need to look for them. I just want to be present with what is." That's the heart of mindful silence. Not to run from emotions, but not to be ruled by them either. When you can observe the mind without becoming what it thinks, you start to see the difference between who you are and what the mind is doing. The Buddha once compared the mind to a lake. When the wind blows, the surface ripples and you can't see the bottom. But sit long enough and let things settle and the truth becomes clear, like the lake's bottom gradually revealing itself. This silence isn't empty. It holds everything. It's where real seeing begins. No judgment, no rushing, no reaction. Sitting still, doing nothing, not speaking doesn't mean you're being useless. It means you're finally becoming the witness of your own life. And from that stillness, every action that follows will carry more depth. Because now it flows not from fear or anger, but from awareness gently warmed in silence. In this noisy world, knowing how to sit with silence is an art, and a quiet declaration that says, I don't want to keep chasing, I want to come home. And from that stillness, a quiet strength begins to rise, not from sound, but from inner steadiness. 9. Keeping a silent promise to yourself. Not everyone needs to know what you're working on. Not every commitment has to be written down or shared online. Because there's a deeper kind of promise, the silent vow you make to yourself. Each morning, before the world calls your name, there's a pure moment to ask, do I still remember the promise I made to myself? Not to become wildly successful or to reach some grand milestone. Just this, I promise not to abandon myself today. In Buddhism, there's a beautiful concept called self-vow. A commitment not made for others to hear, but for your own heart to remember. Someone who lives mindfully doesn't do it for praise or admiration. They choose to live deeply because they can't lie to themselves anymore. There was a man who once said he no longer believed in New Year's resolutions. He'd made so many, only to let them fade. It felt like he was lying to himself, more than living his truth. Until one day, he tried something different. He started waking up early, sitting for just 5 minutes each morning, and repeating one quiet sentence in his mind. Today, I will not betray myself. No one knew he was doing this. But after a few weeks, his wife noticed he was less irritable, less distracted, more present. Because when someone lives in alignment with even a silent promise, their energy shifts. No fanfare, no need to prove anything, just holding a steady anchor inside, day by day. The Buddha said, yourself, no one else must make the effort. No one can walk your path for you. And no one can keep your vow but you. And honestly, no one even needs to know. As long as you know and you keep it, that's sacred enough. Many people go their whole lives keeping promises to others, but breaking the one promise that matters most, the one they made to themselves. They think it doesn't matter if no one sees. But every time we break that promise, a little trust inside us erodes. And every time we keep it, even in the smallest way, our inner roots grow stronger. Each day, each small act, each quiet step, we're weaving a life of integrity. And from that quiet strength, not needing to prove anything to anyone, you begin to live by your own standards. And you stop compromising who you truly are. 10. Your mental diet. What you feed your mind each day. Everyone knows how important it is to eat healthy. We've all heard the phrase, you are what you eat. But there's another kind of food quieter, yet far more powerful over time. It's your mental diet. Not all wounds come from what we eat. Some come from what we hear too much, read too much, think too much, and can't digest. Because your mind has its own digestive system. When you're constantly absorbing negative news, harsh words, online drama, and endless comparisons without taking time to process or release them, all of that becomes mental garbage. During a session with older meditators, one woman said gently, I don't watch the morning news anymore, not because I hate the world, but because I don't want my morning to be hijacked by fear that isn't even mine. Such a simple sentence, yet deeply mindful. Everything your mind touches becomes a seed. A sad song can pull your mood down. A violent video may not harm your body, but your nervous system tightens. A quick scroll on social media, and you see someone doing better than you, suddenly you feel small without even realizing it. The Buddha called these inputs mental nutriment, one of the 4 types of food that feed a person, alongside physical food, contact, and intentional thought. Mental nutriment is what you hear, read, watch, and absorb with your attention. If you don't filter it carefully, you might be feeding yourself anger, jealousy, confusion, even if no one has directly hurt you. People often ask, "Why do I feel so unsettled? I haven't done anything wrong." And sometimes the answer lies in small things. How much silence have you allowed in? And how much noise have you taken in? Are you letting your mind rest or filling it with things it doesn't need? Being mindful of your mental diet doesn't mean cutting everything off. It means choosing wisely, setting boundaries, returning to what nourishes you. Just like someone who eats clean no longer views food as mere pleasure, but as care for the body. A mindful person doesn't treat the mind like a trash bin, but like a garden. And once that garden is tended with care, you'll start to notice stillness blossoms, kindness grows, clarity begins to take root. 11. Real change doesn't have to be announced, it speaks for itself. Here's something powerful, yet incredibly quiet. When someone truly changes from within, they don't need to say a word. No status updates. No declarations like, "I'm healing," "I'm slowing down," or "I'm becoming mindful." Because genuine transformation has its own energy. It shows in a softer gaze, in longer pauses before speaking, in deeper listening. It's not loud. It doesn't try to prove anything, but everyone around can feel it. This person is different. At a meditation retreat by the California coast, a quiet middle-aged man sat in the corner for 7 days. He didn't talk much. He just sat, breathed, and smiled gently as people walked by. On the last day, a younger participant came up and said, "You didn't share anything all week, but every time I saw your eyes, my heart felt calm." We live in a time where speaking out is seen as proof of being real. People constantly update their changes and achievements as if they don't post it, it didn't happen. But in Buddhism, what's true doesn't need to be shouted. A lotus doesn't make a sound, yet the whole pond is filled with its fragrance. After his enlightenment, the Buddha sat in silence for 7 weeks. Not because he had nothing to say, but because the first radiance of awakening wasn't meant to be explained. It was meant to be felt. So if someone is quietly practicing, walking slower, living deeper, they don't owe anyone an explanation. They don't need everyone to understand the path they're on. All that matters is they know and they keep walking it. Change will reveal itself in the way they enter a room, in how they stop reacting like before, in how their presence feels peaceful, even without words. When your energy shifts, your eyes shift. When your mind calms, your presence becomes your loudest message. That's when you understand. Stability doesn't come from convincing others you've changed. It comes from staying true to yourself every day in the smallest of ways. 12. Silence, the door to inner freedom. Silence isn't just about not talking. Real silence is the art of living in this world without letting the world pull you off center. In a world where reacting feels like a reflex, someone says something and we feel we have to respond. Someone hurts us and we feel we have to defend. Someone praises us and we rush to accept. Someone criticizes and we rush to prove. In such a world, choosing silence is a sacred practice. Not out of fear, not out of suppression, but from awareness. It's the moment you clearly see a reaction rising in your mind, but you don't let it control you. One Buddhist practitioner once shared, "Every time I choose not to react, at first I feel weak, but then I realize I'm not weak. I'm just choosing not to be a slave to my anger." What a powerful realization. Simple, but deep. In meditation, the first lesson isn't about killing off thoughts. It's about not reacting to them. Thoughts rise and fall. Just like waves on water, we can't stop the waves, but we don't have to dive in. The Buddha once said, "Non-reaction is the path to freedom." When your mind is no longer disturbed by praise or blame, gain or loss, love or hate, that's when true peace arises. And this path doesn't begin with big things. It starts in tiny moments. Someone says something annoying. You feel the irritation rise, but you choose to breathe. Something confusing happens. Your mind looks for someone to blame, but you choose to sit still. No one sees the battle you're facing. But inside, you're taking a giant step toward freedom. I once guided a group of elder meditators at a center in Oregon. One lovely lady, over 70, said, "I can't sit for long meditations, but when my grandkids come over and make a mess, I stay silent. I just watch and breathe, and the irritation passes before I know it." Who says practice has to be complicated? Sometimes, choosing not to react is the practice. And the freedom the Buddha spoke of, it's not something far away. It's right here, when you're no longer dragged around by every passing emotion. You still feel sadness, joy, wins, and losses, but you're no longer the one being tossed by those waves. You're the one who sees, who breathes, who lives from a deeper place. And when you've lived with that silence long enough, your heart becomes steady enough to choose a new standard, one where you don't lower yourself for a passing feeling, but live from a solid ground you've built breath by breath in stillness. 13. Live with high standards, quietly, every day. Here's something odd about humans. We tend to make big promises at emotional moments. At New Year's, after a breakdown, in a spark of motivation, but most of those promises fade away. Not because we're insincere, but because promises, without daily practice, wash away like words written in sand. The Buddha didn't ask us to make grand declarations. He taught this. It's what you repeat every day through your body, speech, and mind that shapes who you are. One practitioner once told me he had written in his journal, "I will live peacefully. I will live mindfully. I will live kindly." And he carried that notebook around for a whole year. But then one day, he said to me, "I'm still snapping at my wife. Still complaining about my boss. Still feeling jealous when someone else succeeds. So, what do those words even mean if I don't live them daily?" Such an honest reflection, and it's something we can all relate to. Real transformation doesn't come from what we say. It comes from what we repeat, quietly, patiently, every single day. A person with high standards isn't someone perfect. They still stumble, still feel tired, but they never settle for less than what they know is right. They choose to wake up early, even when no one's waiting. They choose silence over arguments, even when they could win. They choose to meditate, to move their body, to do their work with care, not because anyone's watching, but because that's how they stay true to themselves. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha taught, no one can purify another. Only through your own actions can you purify yourself. And it's action, not feelings, that brings lasting change. You might feel inspired in a moment, but if you don't build habits to carry that energy forward, it fades. On the other hand, if you keep doing what's right over and over, even when no one's watching, eventually it becomes second nature. Habits shape your character. Character shapes your presence. And your presence, without saying a word, becomes your living message. So if you're wondering, how do I live a meaningful life? The answer isn't far away. It's in what you choose to repeat tomorrow morning, in how you behave when no one's looking, in whether or not you hold yourself to your own standards when no one's reminding you. And that is where we'll pause today. Not to end, but to invite you to continue on this quiet, steady, powerful journey. And when everything else settles, when there are no more promises to write down, no one left to impress, just you and the small daily acts you repeat in silence, those become the invisible force shaping who you are. You don't need to chase transformation. Just live true to what you know is right. Patiently, gently, kindly, with yourself. As the Buddha once said, better than conquering 1,000 armies is conquering yourself. And that kind of victory doesn't come in one grand day. It's built in 7 quiet days that you dared to begin. You don't have to become someone else to be recognized. You just need to be sincere enough to come home to a steadier, stronger, freer version of your own heart. That's where this path leads. Not to a brand new destination, but to a brand new way of walking the same road. And if today's message touched even a small corner of your heart, please subscribe to Buddhism Seeds, where we continue to share the Buddha's wisdom, mindful stories, and simple yet deep daily practices. Like this video, share it with someone who might need a quiet reminder, and leave us a comment. What quiet promise are you keeping to yourself this week? Thank you for listening, not just with your ears, but with your heart. Wishing you steadiness on your path, and see you again in the next mindful moment.